This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Become a patron today at patreon.com/into the portal.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm Amber Ray.
And I'm Andrew McKay. And welcome back to another Film Friday episode, where today we're looking at one that's, I would say, is slightly darker than the first two that we've covered, although along the same trend.
Yes, very dark.
Yeah.
They're all dark, but this one in particular has another nuance to it, I would say, because you do get this sort of horrific supernatural element, but you also see a lot of, like, what was, to me, very genuine looking scenes of grieving, a family in grief, too. Yeah, so that can be disturbing on a different level. Yeah,
psychological disturbance, like, from that level, too. So we're covering the film Hereditary today. And this was suggested by a handful of people. A whole bunch of people recommended this one, and I hadn't heard of it. Had you actually heard of it before it was suggested?
No.
Which is weird because, I mean, like, we're both fans of Toni Collette. She's a great actress, and we've seen her in all kinds of stuff. But, so this was recommended by a bunch of people, and
recent
for
release.
Good reason.
And you know what's funny? Like, maybe we hadn't really heard of it because it was just from the summer. Yeah. 2018 release, and I don't know how widely, how wide the actual campaigns went. Like, I don't even remember seeing, like, we don't really watch that much television anyway, but I don't remember seeing very many, like
ads for it. Yeah, I know, and, like, we don't really go to the movies that much either, but we didn't see trailers for it when I remembered going back. Like, we were there relatively recently, but a little bit less mainstream, but those are usually the best ones, right?
A little bit, yeah. It was directed by Ari Aster. To be honest, I didn't really do any digging. His name wasn't familiar to me, but if he has any other really sweet films out there that we haven't heard of, again, get us, guys.
Yeah, for sure. Stuff. This is all about what you guys choose, so we're just getting into the nitty-gritty of the movie.
Definitely. And it was actually, interestingly, Toni Collette was also an executive producer on this film, too.
Nice.
Yeah. So, let's do just a quick... I think we should start off with a plot overview.
Sure, and once again, obviously, for people who listen to the first two, like, spoilers
abound.
Yeah, lots of spoilers. And so this one's even the most recent of the three, so go, if you can handle it, go watch it before you listen to this review.
Definitely. Before we get into any of this, as far as the summary, just want to say, like, we've already said it, it's disturbing on a different level, and it's actually kind of hilarious because when we rented it, it was off of just our Shaw on Demand, or Telus on Demand. Yeah. And it had a suggested rating of 14A.
Yeah, and I was like, no.
And that threw me off. I was like, well, what the heck? We can handle this.
Sure.
No problem. Yeah. But no, there's some very graphic images along with the deep-seated psychological disturbing scenes.
Definitely.
So, summary here. So basically this film follows a family after the recent loss of their matriarch. This was a woman of about 87 years old. Yeah. And the film starts off with basically her obituary. It would have been in the paper. And it's very telling. I really like the way they started with that because it's so ordinary. Yeah. And it's exactly what you would say about someone, really. Like, like, a lot of people don't like to get into the whole life story of their lost one. And, but it just shows you, right, like, right away, like, what's never said. Right. You're just lines. Given the generic stuff. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So basically, this film follows the family after this loss. Basically, she's outlived by her daughter, granddaughter, a grandson, and also a son-in-law. Yeah. The family kind of starts to unravel the mysteries of their past a little bit, or it kind of just comes on full force. They don't even really try. It's just kind of coming at them. Pretty much, yeah. And it becomes very clear that each is fighting demons beyond their capabilities or even awareness at some points, it kind of seems. Yeah. There's a lot of denial going on, I think.
There's definitely a lot of that in this movie, for
sure. There is. And there's a lot of stuff that you see, but you're almost like seeing it through what seems like a store display window.
Right, which is ties into a prominent aspect of the film that we will mention in a minute, obviously.
Exactly. So, the opening sequence, again, like after we see that initial obituary, I thought was really effective as far as anchoring the film. So the opening sequence, you basically get the backyard and that treehouse depicted through a first-story window.
Right.
And basically, this is her workshop, Toni Collette's character Annie's workshop. She is a designer of these, like, model miniatures, like, scenes. And it's never really explained what that is exactly.
It's not explained, but she gets these phone calls throughout the movie, clearly from her, like, client or whatever. Projects, and it almost sounds like she's doing it for, like, a museum. Like, she's recreating miniatures of, you know, historic buildings or something or whatever. I could totally see, like, that type of thing. It's, like, commissioned for, you know, a house design and you need a miniature model, or you need something for a museum or whatever. The
only ways I've ever seen that type of miniaturism, like, employed is in archaeology. Like, or sorry, not archaeology, architecture.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, so you get a mini model and...
Obviously, if you're building dollhouses.
There you go.
So that's another kind of, like, for me, the dollhouse is even creepier than this whole model. Yeah, but she isn't limited to buildings, right? Because she ends up depicting a very important scene of the movie, which we'll get to in just a second. So essentially, you get this, the camera panning away from this window, and it slowly transitions into a very close-up shot of a miniaturized version of the actual home that the family inhabits.
Slowly
it's very slow, very drawn out, and then eventually it kind of zooms into the second-story bedroom, and the bedroom itself kind of actually turns into the bedroom. So that's where we kind of get these, like I said, it anchors this sort of theme of, like, I don't even know how best to put it into words. It's like kind of like this theme of, like, a display or a charade of sorts, or like a play.
Sure.
It's like a play where you're not really seeing all of it. You're just seeing the parts that they want you to see.
Right.
Almost.
Definitely.
Like,
I think the other way... Yeah, no, that's exactly... Like, because you made the comment early on that you could tell... Like, the characters are all very distant. Right? Like, even from the very beginning, like, the opening scene is the funeral, and you have Annie, the mother, who's her mother has passed away, and she's standing up there basically, like, you know, she makes that comment, like, I'm so heartened to see, like, all these strangers show up at the funeral or whatever, which was, like, so bizarre. Faces. And there's all these sort of, like, subtly really weird, like, not quite right moments right from the get-go in that scene, yet she's just kind of, like, going through the motions of, like, very typically, I don't even know.
Even
it's like,
before that, right? Like, when you get the transition into the actual bedroom of the eldest son.
Yeah.
The only son, but the eldest of the two. And you see this very casual encounter between the father waking him up and him getting ready for this funeral that they're all going to.
Yeah.
And then you get, exactly, a very casual, distant delivery of the eulogy. She basically almost sounds like she's kind of just, like, trying to list off a bunch of stuff.
Right.
Like, it's like when you're put on the spot in the classroom or something, and you're just, like, really bored. Not really bored, but you just don't really care enough to really, like... She didn't put her heart into that at all, right? Like, so that to me speaks to the type of relationship she had
just wanted to get it over with is kind of, like, how it came across.
Oh, exactly. And even what you just said, right, with, like, how she makes that comment where she says, it's very heartening to find all these unfamiliar faces here, to remember my mother.
Right. Implying that her mother was horrible, pretty much, right? Like, oh, I'm surprised to see, like, it's heartening to see that there's anyone here at all.
True. Because, like, but then at the same time, it's almost like she looks around the room and feels a greater distance or a greater sense of uncomfortability because of the fact that she can't reach out to any of these people. She doesn't know who they are. They don't know her. Even though she has been on and off contact with her mother, which we kind of get into in later scenes.
Yeah.
But it's very... Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was very interesting. And then you get the scene where they're all approaching the body, right, to say their final goodbyes. And Charlie, who is the youngest, who's about 13 years old, and she's a very disturbing-looking girl.
She's disturbed in general.
Disturbed and disturbing to look at, which I think was very intentional as well.
Of course, yeah.
You're just, like, instantly, like, you're not normal.
No. Well, the makeup is done very effectively.
Very effectively. And the lighting. The lighting, for sure. Amplifies that to the extreme, almost.
Yeah.
But the way that this little girl looks, there's this one part of that scene where she goes up to look at her dead mother. Grandmother, sorry. Her mother, though, honestly, because she was almost handed to her at birth.
Yeah.
Out of guilt on Annie's part, seemingly, but maybe not. I don't know. Weird. But she looks over and sees this very creepy looking man
Yeah.
And his presence is never explained in that scene.
No.
It's almost as if, like, you might think to yourself, like, oh, he's just part of the funeral service. He's part of the funeral home. Like, you know, he's just...
And the camera angle for that was not like a unique angle, but it's like Charlie leaning over the casket, and then she kind of, like, turns around, looks over her shoulder as if she feels like she's being watched, which of course she is, because it's a funeral and she's at the front of the room. But she turns around, and then it's just like this like sinister Pennywise-esque grin on this just unnamed random dude.
Mm-hmm. And she does make the observation of that necklace that her grandmother is wearing, carrying with her to the grave.
Yeah.
Freaky stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
So of course, so the funeral scene is the opening scene, and then they kind of make their way back, and Annie, the mother, opens up the box of her mom's stuff, of the grandmother's stuff.
Yes.
And that's kind of the first. That's that first little snippet you get from Annie, where she's like, her mother's death and the vibes she was getting at that funeral were weird, and like things are not quite right for some reason.
Totally. And she even says it, like, very, like, bluntly almost when they first walk in the door. And you always get that scene from that same angle. There's the one open wall, right? It's the same you get with sitcoms, with plays, right? Where there's the one open face that the audience gets to view from. And that's what we get all the time, right? So we get that classic, so we get that scene. And, and essentially she just says it, right? She's like, this is weird. Like, should I feel more sad?
Yeah.
Like, should I, like, she doesn't know. Yeah. And then you're just like, you kind of shrug it off. You're like, it's the grieving process. Like, everyone kind of goes through it differently.
Right, and the husband makes that comment too, right? He's like, you should feel however you should feel, and whatever. It'll come.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really.
Not really. Not in the way it comes later on when she is grieving yet again. So, okay. And then also what I thought was really interesting is Peter, too, the oldest son.
Yeah.
How he's basically, like, super nonchalant either. Everyone's nonchalant. It's almost as if this was, like, a big, like, thing hanging over them, and now it's kind of not there anymore. So it's kind of just an absence that... And
you're left to guess, because you don't really know what the circumstances were with the grandmother before her passing. Mm-hmm. You're just you're given the impression that it was strange, and that... especially with Charlie was the only one with a real kind of sort of a connection. Before we even
she's the only one disturbed by the whole thing.
She's the only one disturbed by the whole thing. And like the scene where, one of the early scenes where Annie comes into Charlie's bedroom to kind of talk to her about what had happened. And she's like, you know, Charlie's saying how she's like, I miss grandma or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like...
Does she say that, though?
Something along those lines, right? Mm-hmm. She's like, she's asking who's going to take care of me.
Yeah.
Right? Almost as if she was told that, like, you know, her grandmother was the only one who could look after her. What else was she told about that? Like, why does she... It's like she fears her mother, almost. You know what I mean?
She's distant from her, too.
Very distant.
And the mother... That's a really telling scene, right? That bedtime scene where... Charlie turns away from her.
Yeah.
Physically and emotionally, she doesn't open up to her at all. She basically asks her a very blunt question, that thing, right? And then she even follows it up by saying, like, but when you die, you know what I mean? Like, which people could take that as, like, a normal question a child would ask after a death, right? Where it's like, oh, like, I didn't realize people could die, so therefore you might just end up dying on me. So kind of asking those questions now.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really come across that way. No. Like, she doesn't really seem... Like I said, right, everything about her is abnormal. It's just kind of off and freaky, man. Like, freaky. I really love the way that child acted that role. She did a smoking job. I honestly don't know the actor's name off the top of my head. But...
it was Millie Pullman or something, or something like
Millie, yeah, totally.
Yeah, what a name. It's a perfect name.
But that's interesting, right? Because Annie is, like, reaching. Like, you see her in that scene, she reaches over, and she's, like, trying to, like, almost, like, have some sort of bonding moment, but it's really forced and really awkward. And she even makes a comment, says, you never cried, even at birth. Basically, at birth, she handed her to her grandmother, so who knows what kind of weird influences were in that room at that time, right? You never know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought that was really weird. It's evident right off the bat that they have a very distant relationship.
Everyone's relationship with everyone is really distant.
And I think that's one of the major themes of this movie is kind of like this dissolution of the family unit and the house as the site of that dissolution. It's no longer a site of connectivity, of getting together, of sharing things, of bonding.
Right.
It's all the opposite.
And you're left with a sense of unease because of that, and also because you don't know what it was like before the grandmother passed away, why these people are so distant, right? Like, you don't know why, really. It's like they're not just weird because the daughter's weird, or, you know, the son's a stoner and kind of distant because he's just this teenage boy, which is very typical or whatever, right? It's more than that.
It does seem like more than that, even though he is very, like, stereotypical in that sort of, like, he's just a pot smoking, whatever. Yeah, kind of, like, doesn't really care about his grandma dying. She's like, whatever, it's just, like, some old lady or something.
Well, there was that scene with the dad, too, where he comes into the room and he's like, you okay? Like, you want to talk about this? And he's like, you know, he's
nothing to say.
He's like, I'm fine, because the implication, they imply that he hated his grandmother.
Kind of, yeah.
Right? They're like, I'm okay with this because she was horrible. It's really the vibe that I got from that scene.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we find out, should I mention the part about when Annie goes to the meeting?
The Grief Anonymous meeting, yes, that's kind of where I was leading to, too.
Okay, so shortly after all this stuff, Annie goes to, this Grief Anonymous meeting, and she's kind of got the gnarliest story in the group or whatever, right? And she's sitting there, and that's where we get that's the only time in the movie we get that bit of the background, right?
And you never trust it, though, because it's all from Annie's perspective. You never get it from anyone else's, which is, like, I hate that in movies, because I always I'm like, there's probably another side to this story.
And you don't get the grandmother. Like, there wasn't even, like, the 2-minute opening scene before her death or some weird thing where they, like, show something.
Or even flashbacks, which they will do often.
Yeah, which they did, which is kind of a good thing. I mean, that's maybe a little cliche for the style of film, so
it's fresh.
It's kind of cool how they didn't do that. But anyway, so she's sitting in this meeting, and she makes the comment about how, you know, death had been following her for a long time. So, like, her brother committed suicide in her mother's room, hung himself, and claimed that the mother had been, like, implanting demons in him.
Yeah, she explains it as schizophrenia.
Right.
And then also there was another tragedy with her father. I can't remember what happened there exactly, but there's something that she mentioned as well. And it's just, like, literally, she just starts talking. This happens a couple times in the movie where Annie starts talking, and then it just turns to, like, this huge, like, waterfall of just, like, emotional release to a certain extent, but just, like, I wouldn't call it word garbage, because it all makes sense and it's all highly illuminating. Like, she does it at the dinner table too later on.
Yeah.
But very interesting, where you get those emotional outbursts and then the quick withdrawal kind of back into her. Everyone has their shells seemingly, and no one really likes to come out of them.
Yeah.
But then you do get those sort of moments of clarity or whatever. But that was so she basically, you called it, she's got, like, the gnarliest story ever. And so that, again, it almost seems as if a lot of these things might be replaying. Like, it's hereditary in the sense that it's almost like these cycles, these loops that keep recurring.
Well, there you go. The title comes back into play in a few different ways, potentially, in this movie.
Exactly, because even the relationship, like we were just commenting on, between Annie and Charlie, I feel like a very similar relationship could have taken place between Annie and her mother.
Absolutely.
Where she was, like, completely distant. Her mother didn't really... Yeah, like, it was just this strange thing where her mother kind of ignored her in favor of her brother for interesting reasons that kind of come to light by the end of the film. Yeah.
So things pretty much get... Okay, here's the thing with this movie. There's the scene that really just... It goes at a 90-degree angle. Like, it's like all of a sudden you're watching and then it's like slap in the face. Like, did not see that coming.
No.
So therefore, you know, go watch the movie before you listen to this.
Yes.
So there's the scene where... Clearly Annie is, like, wanting some space or whatever, and she's fed up with the fact that her, like, daughter is a weirdo in a lot of ways. And she's like, go to the party because her son asked to borrow the car. Peter's like, can I borrow the car? Whatever, right? Basically forces her daughter to go to this party. She knows full well that it's not a school event. That Peter says, like, oh, it's a school barbecue.
Why the hell would he go to it?
It's like, no, it isn't, right? Any parent
Or
knows
the only
that.
reason I could think of is that she's like, okay, if Charlie goes with him, then he won't do anything stupid. That was the only reason. But very bad judgment on so many levels.
And of course, we're teed up from earlier scenes at the funeral where it's like she takes a bite of a chocolate bar and they're like, oh, does it have nuts in it? She doesn't have it because we don't have the EpiPen.
Yeah.
You should always have the EpiPen, people.
If you're anaphylactic.
If you're anaphylactic and you leave the house, that's what it's
public
for.
Service announcement.
Yes, public service announcement. Okay, that we already said it. That's the service. Just bad parenting in this scenario. So yeah, basically you guys can see the writing on the wall.
But again, right, like, is it bad parenting for obvious reasons? Is it bad parenting with subliminal undertones as to why she's, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of...
Is there an insidious intention to, like, avoiding saying
honestly, I'm not even sure.
Right? So it's like, they go to the party, of course, she ends up eating some cake because he wants to go try to hit on this girl, and throat starts to close up. She doesn't deal with it right away, which is also very juvenile of her, right? Where it's like, she's 13 years old. It's like, you're not 5.
No.
You're 13.
Yeah.
Okay, you can drive a car in 3 years. Yeah. You can drink in Europe in 3 years. You know, your throat's starting to close up. You know what I mean? It's weird.
Everything about her doesn't say 13. It says about 8 to me. 8 or 9.
Something like that.
It's very immature.
So, of course, she's starting to
She's still playing with toys. And she's still got her drawing book, like, she's definitely on the spectrum, and I feel like no one's recognizing it.
Well, yeah, which is ironic, too, because the dad's a doctor. They never say what kind of doctor, but he's a doctor of some kind.
Yeah.
But anyway. But... Of course, she's now suffocating. Peter rushes her out of the house because it's a loud party, and I guess he's thinking calling an ambulance to the party is not the best idea, so jumps in the car. And this is the most disturbing scene in the whole movie, in my personal opinion. In my personal opinion, this is what disturbed me the most.
You missed some of the more disturbing
images. I don't know, maybe it's because, like, I've got 2 younger sisters, and, like, that would be really, like, any sibling or family member. But it's like, if you're just the panic and terror of that moment, like, your sister's suffocating to death in the backseat of the car. Mm-hmm. And he's driving out of control, and I always forget, too, like, when we're watching movies and you see the, speedometer going up, 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 it's like, we live in Canada, so it's like, that's not kilometers, people. That's going, like, 80 miles an hour. That's... a lot faster.
Yeah.
And, of course, she's freaking out, leans her head out the window of the car, trying to get some air.
Which is stupid.
And stupid, but whatever.
The air's the same, man.
Of course.
Your throat's closing.
You guys already know, because you've watched the movie. Peter swerves to avoid a dead animal on the road, which seems almost placed on purpose.
Perfect, right? The placement with the roadside pole, like the light pole, like that's... Anyways. But
swerves to avoid the animal... And in a split second, he goes right past a telephone pole on the side of the road that smashes Charlie's head and decapitates her instantly. I have a question for everyone who's listening right now. Did you expect that at all? Because I thought that Charlie was going to be... prominent character.
I thought that she was going to be the epicenter of all the horrible things that were going to happen in the movie. That's what I thought. Well, they teeter up for that.
You could argue she still was.
Well...
But just the physical character wasn't. Like, her character was died off, but the spirit of her was definitely the central focus. Continuing on, right?
Well,
the mom's trying to contact her.
Yeah.
The brother's afraid.
The only reason she's trying to contact her is because she's influenced by a friend, Joan, that she picks up along the way.
Bitch.
Joan with her stupid mats.
Yeah, and I remembered why I hate that lady, and I'll tell you guys in a minute because I remembered. I remembered. Yeah. So
Charlie is decapitated. Honestly, though, I think what follows after that is even more disturbing in the fact that you get this really long... This movie was really effective in the fact that it used pauses and silences very effectively.
Oh, yeah.
There's that long, drawn-out pause where all you see is darkness. It's the side of the road. You see the car from the side. And then... I don't even know how much time passes.
It's got to be at least 4 seconds or so, like long.
Okay, 4 seconds of real time, but I'm talking about in the scene, right? Sure. How much time passes for him sitting there. He never even looks in the back seat.
Doesn't need to.
Not once. Like, he can hear the silence. He knows that it's not going to be good. And this is another part where you get a very... you get the theme of denial happening again, because he doesn't even acknowledge it, right? He doesn't even look. He just slowly puts his foot on the accelerator, and slowly you see the car drive away.
It's like...
And you don't even know, right? Because then it just, like, goes to the scene where he pulls up, and it's like, hey, wait a second. Did he deal with the body? Did he go bury his sister in the desert? Like, what just happened there? Like, did he even go back for the head? Like, what's going on? And then you just get the scene where he just goes to bed. It's a close-up shot of his face. And you just get, again, you get the first moment where it's almost like a light switch where it goes night to day.
Yeah. No, it is like a light switch. It
is. And that to me again speaks to the idea that the model home they're living in is like there's forces that work beyond that, right? Like they are the models living in it and they're being manipulated from without. But you just get that, and then you get the normal sounds of
getting ready for work or whatever.
Yeah, the chitter chatter, the hustle bustle of getting their keys and everything, and then the horrific, blood curdling screaming moans. Like, you know, like it's not even like, it's just like such a state of despair that it's
the sounds
seemingly unnatural.
Of a mother finding her decapitated daughter in the backseat of their car. Just, I mean, those are the sounds.
You don't even see...
like, and you don't need... And it's more effective because you don't see Tony Collette, right?
And all you see is his eyes, never wavering, never blinking, never changing. And not even a tear.
Not even a tear, but that's the part where you start to wonder. You're like, okay, what is going on with... Is there something that's already gotten to Peter that's insidious in nature? Or is it just, like you said, like in the car? Is it just like... shock. Basically. Because, like, literally, like... I don't even know. Like, you can't... It's impossible to empathize with that situation without actually being in that situation, right? It's like, if you were in the driver's seat of that car in that scenario, and you're not under the front, you're not...
He was stoned. He did take a toke.
Yeah, but...
But that's normal for him. It's not like that's his first time ever.
Right, and it's like, would you... I don't know if I would look in the back seat. I don't even know. Like, I don't even know. Like, how would you... Like, what would... I mean, being in complete shock seems reasonable in that scenario.
Yep.
Like, to the point where you don't even know what to do or say.
And you know what? I feel like from that moment on, Peter is that way for the entire rest of the movie. He's in a state of catatonic shock that he never wakes up from. And even when you get to the very end scene, the final scenes of the movie, where he's like, all right, Peter, wake up, just wake up. Where he's like, he's finally kind of awakening.
Trying to snap out of it,
Yeah.
Just that, it's so funny, right? You and I just literally turned to each other, like, at the exact same moment when that scene was just like...
laughing.
Like, yeah, we did burst out laughing. Because it was like... Did not expect that at all. Just like, just turned over like, Jumanji's starting to look pretty good right now, isn't it, bud? Like, because of course he's
Because there was no way. I'm honestly so friggin' happy that part of the movie was never ruined for us before we watched it, which is why I hope everyone who's listening to this right now has already seen it, because that was so brutal and so dislocating of all of your expectations to follow.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Now
all of your expectations and all of the head.
That's, very fast. So after this, we kind of get a bit of a, not a lull, I'm not going to say that, but like, it's kind of like what seems to be about a few months have gone by kind of thing. And everyone has kind of not grieved properly. I would say everyone's just gone back into their shells seemingly, and everyone's dealing with it separately, never together. You never see a moment of family bonding per se, or anyone hugging to like help the grieving process along, or even like sharing stories or family photos. You don't get any of that. None of it. It's just Charlie's just gone. She's never coming back. Tony Collette's angry, upset, all of the above kind of thing.
But what you slowly start to be introduced to is the sound. And this is the sound that Charlie would make as she was drawing and painting and whatever. And I think it's Peter is the one who hears it first.
He does.
In his bedroom, right?
Yeah.
Creepy. I mean, not creepy in the sense that he ever feared his younger sister either. But clearly they were all so distant that now that she's passed on, wherever she is or whatever, his sense of, like, I guess the violent nature of the accident as well might make him believe that, I don't even know, like,
that she might come for vengeance.
Like, there's some bad juju on him a little bit for him being irresponsible or something. You know what I mean? Like,
or even the way that he dealt with it or didn't deal with it right away, or I don't even know. The way that literally his sister's head was left on the side of the highway for hours and hours and was devoured by fire ants. Like,
appetizing.
That's something else.
Yeah. Good times, yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. I would say, like, the number one word to describe Peter's character is opaque.
Yeah.
And zombie-like. Like, he is basically he's a shell of his former self. Like, he's a shadow. Like, you see him in classrooms, hair greasy, a mess, like, his eyes vacant. There's that one scene where he sees his shadow his reflection smile back at him.
Right.
And then as well, he gets slowly sort of inducted into this sort of high strangeness that has kind of enveloped this entire family.
Yeah, I mean, this movie, like you said at the beginning, like, it goes from being... You don't know if it's going to be a haunting, if it's like
occult
black magic, or if it's just a straight like a demonic entity. You know, all those things are related, but they're also used in individual movies. You know what I mean? Like there's a movie about an exorcism, there's a movie about a haunting, there's a movie about this is like kind of all coming together.
It's a little more ambiguous, and at that point, right, where they're all grieving over Charlie, and it becomes a lot of the focus becomes on the family and their lack of togetherness, their lack of any bonds whatsoever. You get that one scene at the dinner table where it's just like they're all just shattered people. Yeah. And even like Peter's reaction to his mother's outburst is just in the same framework, right, as his earlier responses, where he's just like nothing. He just is staring. Yeah. Just like doesn't even. I don't even know. Like,
he's clearly devastated, but at the same time, it's
can't even process any more of it. Like
right. And of course, I can't remember actually if it was before or after this. I think it was before, when we get the story from Annie about the reason why her relationship with Peter isn't very good. Right.
She meets with Joan. Right.
She meets with Joan. So
Joan singles her out.
So this lady named Joan, they kind of meet through the grief counseling thing, and then she approaches Annie in her vehicle months later or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't say anything. I know you're probably thinking like, yeah, right, Andrew, but like I didn't say anything. But it's the second that I saw that lady in that scene, you knew something was up. I knew it wasn't just a lady being nice, being like, how you doing? And maybe it's just because I recognized her from the character from The Handmaid's Tale. She's the controlling total.
I can't remember her. Yeah. She's like a mother.
What's her role? I can't remember the name. But anyway, she's like the master of the handmaids, and she's just a bitch. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I could tell. So Joan approaches her and gives her her number. She's so warm,
right? Yeah, she's so open and and she one-ups her, right, in the scene with the car, right? Because
my son drowned and
my grandson.
Yeah.
So she's like, I know what you're experiencing times 2. Yeah. So you better let me in, essentially. And Annie, you can tell, like when she walks away or drives away from that initial encounter, she's just like, whew, she kind of shakes her head. But then later on, when she's working, she finds the slip of paper.
Yeah.
All of this feels... Okay, so that to me felt really intentional. It's almost like, was there some type of witchcraft that kind of like put that out there? Obviously it could be either way, and it's just whatever, ambiguous. But then again, also, like we already mentioned with the animal carcass and that placement, and to me, I had this question recur several times watching it and after, like, you answered it pretty well, because I posed it to you, but I was like, where does it start? Like, how much of this is actually just random? How much of this is actually caused by this sort of nefarious force that's working without the family knowing?
Yeah. And how much does that tie into the title of the film, Hereditary? Like, how long has this been going on
exactly.
for? Right? Yeah. So it's like, so the grandmother's a part of this cult, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. And then, but the question...
has been her entire life.
Exactly. But the question that we're given over and over again by Annie's facial expressions, by her actions, by her demeanor, is how much about this do you know?
Yeah.
Were you aware of this stuff happening? Exactly. And I think that's the point I was trying to make earlier with like the grief counseling thing. It's like, yeah, my brother had schizophrenia and he claimed that my mother was trying to implant demons in him and he hung himself. The way she said that was almost like she knew there was something more to it.
Yeah. And that's, again, where this theme of denial.
Right.
Where she's living in this perennial state. Who knows how long it's gone on for. She alludes to it herself where she's like, I was talking to my mother, I wasn't talking to her. Like, it's almost as if she's not even clear of the timeline itself. Like, what if she was even, to a certain extent, not possessed by her mother, but just so heavily influences and so, like...
You can be in a trance without being possessed. I feel like almost right? Like where you're.
Or she's just so deeply entrenched in it that she's unconscious of how much of a part of it she is.
Right, and then of course, so she meets Joan, tells Joan about why her relationship with Peter's so awful, which is essentially he has never been able to let go of this her sleepwalking, where there was this one event where with the paint thinner, right. That is messed up. Can you imagine that? How do you even get over that? Like, I don't blame him. Like,
I don't blame him either, to be honest. I would lock my bedroom door every night.
Yeah.
I honestly would.
So you're doused in paint thinner, both you and your sister and your mother. She's standing over you with a lit match, asleep.
And her striking the match is the only thing that woke her up.
So it's like, 1, what is the dream you're having? Or 2, what is controlling you at that time? And how long have you been having those types of dreams, nightmares, or occurrences, or whatever, right?
Exactly. And what is the point of that? Like, was that something that perhaps her mother was controlling? Or no? Or was this just, like, a product of her sort of disillusionment and all this sort of, like, I don't know, just mental illness that kind of just, like, coalesce and manifest out of this state of denial and out of this radical denial of who she is and who her family is, you know? Like, because you never get, obviously, it's all, like, they describe it as a matriarch. You never get strong male characters in this film. You don't get obviously, like, you don't get any of the grandfather. He's gone, years gone by.
Yeah.
And then with the husband, he's very, he's quiet. He doesn't really, like...
He's reserved.
Take control.
Sure. Yeah.
He doesn't really, he just lets everyone do their thing, and he's kind of in his own little world himself, just like everyone else. It's like everyone's living in their own little miniature model home. Yeah. That is their head. It's their mind. And then the place they inhabit in the house, like, they don't even, it is a house. It's not a home.
Right.
It's a model house kind of thing.
Just like the one she makes.
It's an illusion.
Exactly.
Essentially.
Yeah. I guess another way of thinking about her and her model making, too, as a metaphor for the film is not just like we're watching it like a play where it's open and not a home but a house and all those things, but also the idea that they're being watched. Like, it's a half a dollhouse, and it's like, sure, it's like a play, it's wide open, but it's like what demonic things are watching them on display just for those things, waiting for the right moment to take the son or take whatever they want because the grandmother's kept tabs on it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so we've kind of come up to, like, I think we've covered a lot of the main sort of plot devices, a lot of the main scenes, except for the climax.
Yeah, and this whole idea of the 8 kings of hell, which is bizarre. It
is bizarre. Before we even get into that, though,
okay,
like,
sure. Sorry,
kind of saving that for the last.
Okay.
But yeah. So essentially, what we get now. Okay, let's just review here. So we've got Annie and Joan communicating.
Right.
We've got Joan. There's a lot of coincidences, a lot of like seemingly coincidences, but not really. Where there's the scene where Annie goes to get more supplies, right? To make more miniatures. She's still working on her models.
Yeah.
She runs into Joan in the parking lot. Joan seemingly doesn't see her. It's Annie that has to approach her. As soon as Annie makes the first point of contact, Joan is, oh my gosh, she's so warm again. She's so, oh Annie, like I've had like a miracle. Essentially, she's a changed woman, all this stuff. And then that's when you kind of get inducted into this whole idea that they can bring her back. Charlie, I mean, they don't even, oh, exactly, not bring her back, but yeah, communicate with her from the other side. It's interesting though, they think about that in regards to Charlie, never in regards to the grandmother. No one wants to bring her back. But I guess, like untimely death, timely death, who knows. But anyways, so yeah, so essentially you get that, and then you get this scene, right, where Annie goes back to Joan's house. And she has a very violently negative reaction to the seance before her, which again makes me think that they're actually alluding to past occurrences where she's been exposed to this kind of thing and then radically rejected it or denied it.
Yeah.
And so when she gets this, like, it's almost like an overwhelming, like, I don't even know, like, she does a very... just a brilliant job acting in
she's
the whole
so
movie.
Great. She's a great actress.
Movie.
Yeah.
But in that scene in particular, I found very telling, right? Because she should be jumping for joy. There's this 7-year-old spirit supposedly writing, I love you, Grandma, on a thing. So it's like, wouldn't she be like, hell yeah, like I can, finally reach out to my daughter and whatever else and like actually have more of a positive reaction?
Maybe a part of her fear was that being in that situation and having her hair brushed and seeing this actual paranormal stuff was like, was freaking her out because she was aware of the evils that her mother was a part of. And seeing this on that level was just a very current, like, justification that it's real and not just the good stuff, but the really stuff you don't want to be part of.
That's a good point,
actually. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's because, like, that's the freaky part to me. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, if you see Casper the Ghost, great, sweet. What about all the other ones?
Once you open that door, can you really close it? And so that's where she kind of basically rushes out of there, but not before Joni stuffs into her hand that piece of paper, right, with the instructions.
Oh, and she makes a comment. She's like, I don't know what it says. They just told me how to say it. You just have to say it.
Yeah, exactly.
If anybody hands you anything in a language you don't understand,
tells you to recite it.
Translate it first. Especially if it's Latin. Yeah. Or, like, ancient Arabic or something. Or, like, you know what I mean? Like, anything. Ancient Hebrew. Give it a minute. Look into it, okay?
And so it's very interesting, again, because we are not privy to Annie experimenting with this on her own. All we see is her very excitedly running up to her son's room, where she awakens him quite suddenly, right? And he's in the middle of, I think he's having a strange dream. I can't remember exactly.
I can't remember if that was the part where he's getting his head pulled.
Oh, no. That was a different part. Okay. That comes later on.
She's always in and out of his room, though, freaking him out.
Yeah.
The whole movie.
Yeah, exactly. So he's never really sure when she's entered, what she's doing, all this stuff.
Talk about no privacy.
Oof. Yeah, I know, right? But essentially she's like saying like, I feel so horrible. I can't believe the things I said. You need to forgive me right away, blah, blah, blah. Come down. We've got to do this. And then you get this whole like, very very disturbing scene where it's like he reacts super negatively too, right? He just starts having a panic attack as soon as activity starts taking place. He
starts crying.
Exactly. He says, "Can't you feel that? Can't you feel the air?" Like, what did he say? Flexing.
Can't you hear the air flexing?
Or feel it flexing.
What does that even feel like?
I don't know, but I don't want to know. And then meanwhile, the dad is completely like, what? He's just like, I'm just here and I don't believe any of this and I don't understand what's going on. And he's just like, I feel so sorry for this chap, man. Like, he should have got out of there ages ago.
Yeah.
What's he doing?
Here's the other interesting thing about that scene, too, that brought up some questions for me. So we have the moment where the candle flares up, and then all of a sudden the voice of Charlie is in Annie, right?
He checks, right? He goes under the table to look to see what the trick is.
Right, and of course there's
no trick. And then he comes up slowly as she's, like, moaning, like
yeah. And it's Annie.
And it's like...
and it's Charlie. Right?
Yeah.
That would be so terrifying to hear that voice. Like, it's exactly your daughter's voice, deceased daughter's voice. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. But what was so disturbing about it is that she's panicked. And the interesting thing about that is that you're sort of given, like the scene earlier on when Charlie, before she's dead, and she snips the head off the bird, and there's like weird things about her, and there's clearly an indication that she is involved in some of this demonic stuff that her grandmother had passed along, hereditary, right? But
is she in hell?
But also, but here's the other thing. In that scene, she's saying like, "Why is everyone afraid? Like, what's wrong? Like, mom, like, what's wrong?" And it's the little girl. It's not the weird blend of a girl and a demon or whatever's going on. So it's almost like in her deceased form now. It's like there is the real Charlie. But her physical form on Earth was this constant fighting back and forth of a demonic entity and the fact that she had a female form, which comes into play at the end.
It does, because they say that outright, right? Like, I didn't really know how to interpret that right off the bat when they are in the final scene where what's his name? Peter, he ascends into the treehouse thing. And then you get this ceremony taking place. It's a ritual.
We skip into that? We skipping right to
that? No. I just wanted to comment on the idea that that he is the corrected form. They say that, right? Yeah. They say that we have corrected your feminine form. Right. You've shed your first body, so to speak. It's almost like a death and rebirth. Like, is the death rebirth, is that Charlie's death? Did that have to happen?
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Right. With what I'm saying here.
Okay, so that to me makes the accident intentional. Right. Makes everything intentional.
Like, not intentional on Peter's part.
No,
but just intentional in general.
Intentional as, like, this is how the fates have decided.
But we are the fates deciding. They placed that animal in the middle of the road and made him swerve.
Exactly, right.
And then, obviously, the other thing about that, and the fact that it might be intentional, is the decapitation. Because we find Annie in one of the very last scenes before Peter ascends into the treehouse and stuff, where she goes up to the attic, and there is a decapitated body up there with the symbol of this cult that her mother's been wearing on her neck all these years, and you never bothered to Google it.
No.
Smeared in blood on the ceiling.
So then she rushes to the box and reveals, like, like there's this whole demonology and this whole, like, book of scripture and, like, basically a spell book. Yeah. Like a grimoire.
And I love it, too. It's literally, like, the first book, like, on the top of the box. It's like, you never...
It wasn't the first book. There was the photos on the first and then after.
Sorry. So hard to find.
Right below the surface.
You never noticed that?
Actually really great, though. If you think about the analogy of that, it was just below the surface. Right. All you had to do was open the box. It's like Pandora's box.
There you go. Well, yeah, no kidding. Yeah, seriously. So she finds what she believes to be her mother, which it clearly is, with decapitated. right? And then, of course,
she doesn't have the knowledge that the grave has been desecrated. It's only the husband that has that knowledge.
Until, well, actually, that's not entirely true. He doesn't tell her right away earlier on, but you're never given the part where he does. So you're not really sure if he does or doesn't tell her.
He never does. He doesn't. I don't think he does. I think he tries to save her because he saved her from that, right? That's a disturbing fact that your mother's grave was desiccated in like less than a week. And so when Tesser's like, oh, it's just annoying like billing or whatever.
Yeah, I know, but that was a week after the funeral, and then the body being in the attic, that's months late. Like, that's after Charlie's death. Anyway, I'm not sure. Anyway, but he does make that comment. He's like, it was you, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And of course, we don't know.
And that's where you get another part of, like, the disintegration of family bonds, right? Where they do not trust each other at all. No. As soon as push comes to shove, they're like, I'm in my own corner, and, yeah, like, screw all you.
Of course. And there's other
he's
points...
He's instantly not believing any of her narrative.
Yeah, totally.
None of it.
None of it.
It's all too little, too late for him.
Yeah.
I feel like his response, again, very similar to his son's, right? Where he's just basically standing there, very, like... He's not fighting with her. He's not arguing back. He's not doing anything. He's not responding.
He's trying to gauge if, like, the woman he married and had children with, like, is still that same person.
Exactly. There's so much doubt.
And we don't know if it was her or not that dug up her mother's grave.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know. We're giving all these signs that we're like, she's clearly unstable, but it's like, is she aware? Mm-hmm. Was it sleepwalking? Did you sleepwalk all the way and dig up your mom's grave?
That's the other thing too, where it's like, yeah, like, is that legit sleepwalking or is that something else, like some sort of like curse or spell put on her or something? You know,
when you're about to burn your kids with paint thinner, I think it's probably more than sleepwalking.
Yeah, I'd say so. There's a little bit of sinister darkness back
so of course we get the majority of the gnarliness of this film at the end, barring the car accident.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of disturbing visuals.
It's pretty epic.
The scene where the husband is burned alive is pretty, like...
little shish kebab.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Because again, right, like, what did she expect? That was the weird part too, because it's almost as if that fire, you know, how she tries to burn the book initially, and then it starts burning her sweater, so she puts it up. How did you expect that to go down?
I think that she thought that she was the one. I mean... This is me speculating.
But then she goes and throws it in anyway for him, and then he ends up burning.
And then her face is like, oh, that was a bad idea.
It was like, it's a bit of shock and a bit of, like, stunned, but then it changes. At the very last second, she goes like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and she keeps...
It's almost like a determined, like, okay, it's been done.
Yeah, she switches back and forth from this, like, possessed to not possessed.
And then what happens after that? Oh my gosh. We forgot to talk about the scene at school where he ends up smashing his face into the desk.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the face, like him smiling,
looking at the reflection.
So that's disturbing too. So he's sitting in his desk, looks to the left, and it's his reflection, but just with this menacing grin.
Exactly.
And there's something...
So that's early on in the movie.
There's something about your own face looking at you differently too. That's more disturbing.
Where you don't
even than,
own
like,
that reflection?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, that to me is more disturbing than looking to the left and being the only person to see, like, a deformed, monstrous face.
Totally.
You know?
And it's very telling of, like, an interiority that isn't accessible by him. You know what I mean? Where it's like there's another side that you're just... that's there. But you're just... you have no access. You're just kind of... You're just, doing your thing, you know, completely unaware of a completely different side.
See, this is why being aloof is always the best.
Yeah.
Just be aloof. Leslie Nielsen.
Well, that works in some degrees. But
it wouldn't work it wouldn't work for him in this scenario. So
then at school, obviously, you get the follow-up to that scene later on in the movie where essentially he is... like, seemingly possessed. Like, he's, like, almost... it looks like he's hanging himself because he's got his hand raised high above his head. His head is tilted to the opposite side, and it's like his face is being pulled up, and it almost looks like this uncomfortable, like, strangulation type thing going on.
Yeah.
And then he just repeatedly slams his head into the desk. And so he ends up going home, of course, passes out, broken nose. His dad gets killed in the meantime, and then he awakens. I think that was one of the most terrifying parts of the movie, too, is when he comes down from his bedroom and sees his dad. Doesn't even react, really. He's just kind of in shock again, I guess. He's
not sure past at first what it is.
Yeah, he's past the point of any sort of normal reaction at all. But then you see Toni Collette above him in the corner of the roof in the living room. And that, to me, like, scared the friggin' shit out of me. Like, I was like,
just levitated up in the corner.
And then he hears something, and then he starts running, and then she just freaking books it after him, and she's wearing that like long flowy outfit that's very just like, she looks like a mental patient that's escaped the asylum and is like completely unhinged.
Well, you make that comment about the hair too. Oh, how, like in these movies,
her symbol of undoing is her hair. Yeah, the crazier it gets. And that goes with, it's just a common trope.
Same thing as the witch. You made that comment about the mother. What was the mother's name in the witch again? Can't remember.
Oh Lord, I can't remember.
But actually, very similar. A lot of similar tropes in this film to the witch, not just the the demon, the connections to hell and occult magic and this kind of stuff, but just like the family, the distantness of all the family, right? The slow undoing of the mother into this spiral of madness.
The choosing of the most vulnerable person in the household to become the monstrous.
Yeah. It just happens to be the son instead of the daughter in this case.
Yeah, totally. Very interesting, the very like final scene where it's him wearing the crown. That again is like a parallel to the witch for me, where it's the close up on the face of the profile, on her profile, and it's just her becoming who she always was, kind of, or is accepting it kind of thing.
Right. So we've got that scene. So Peter gets chased away, and this is like the darkest part, honestly, other than
so he runs up to the attic, slams it. Andrew, you missed it because you were making the pizza.
Not the attic part.
You missed her slamming her head repeatedly into the attic door because she's like levitating on the ceiling of the second floor.
Oh, I did miss that.
Smashing her head repeatedly into the attic door. Okay, and he's just like, Mommy, like, no, like,
I came back for that.
Yeah, but you didn't see her literally like
pretty disturbing,
smashing her head over and over again, like the speed. And then literally seconds after that, she's levitating at the top of the attic, sawing her own head off. So these are the
paranormal things. So she's down below the attic, and next thing you know, he turns around and she's like, literally up there looking down at him out of the corner of her eye, clearly not in control of her body.
No.
Whilst sawing off her own head.
And even before that, right, before he even goes down to see his father's body, you get him rising out of bed, and then behind him you see Toni Collette Annie walking across the air, like across the ceiling, seemingly. Like, just gravity doesn't apply to her anymore. It's just like this weird, like, she's... Right. I don't even know. Like, that was freaky to me, too. All of it's giving me shivers right now. I'm like...
And then, of course, we see this guy with a sinister grin again. So Peter turns, and in the attic, there's these 3 naked people that are clearly just some sort of a hallucination as a part of this whatever's going on. And one of them was the guy from the funeral with that same look on his face.
I didn't recognize Joan as one of them, but maybe she was.
She wasn't in the attic. She was in the treehouse.
Okay, so she's already in the treehouse.
And then, of course, we have this... So he freaks out and he dives through the window of their 3rd story. Falls down, smashes on the ground.
Yeah.
And then that's the point where we kind of realize that the spirit that was occupying Charlie was only half Charlie.
You think, hey?
I think.
So
because then you get this blue light that you see throughout the film. Where he sees it in the classroom before his reflection in the glass and stuff like that. And it plops into his back.
Yeah.
And then that's when he gets up, and you're still not quite sure, is this Peter? Is he going to run away? What? He gets up.
It's the evil.
He sees the light from the treehouse. He climbs up into this absolutely bizarre scene of worship. Very much like... Well, not exactly, but very much like The Ritual, where you've got that creepy worship room in that movie.
Yeah, everyone's bowing down.
And Joan's there, and there's a whole bunch of other people there that were prepared for the sacrifice. Like, she had been teeing up this family for a while. Obviously, right?
Yeah.
And the part that was really strange was like this idol thing at the beginning looked like Jesus.
Yeah.
Like it did. It was like a guy with a beard, a little goatee. It had kind of the spiky crown thing going on.
Sorry, are you talking about the idol at the front of the room in the treehouse?
Yes.
That's Toni Collette's head.
Okay.
That's Toni Collette's head.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, they made it look like it was like...
Yeah, it's very Jesus-esque.
It made it look like it was like on the cross, right?
The thorns.
And like,
That
was Toni Collette's head.
Well, it was. She's
the
literally
world's worst eHarmony profile picture.
You know how you can interpret that? She sacrificed herself. That's what you need, right? In order to summon the King Paimon, it's like the second king of the demons or whatever in this book of demonology, you need a sacrifice. So I'm thinking she was sacrificing herself, sawing off her own head while she's suspended in the rafters of their attic. Yeah. The entire time she's staring at her son. She's like with her eyes down like this. And you made the comment, you're like, is that the horror of her knowing that she's doing this, but she can't control any of what her body's doing?
Yeah.
And so essentially... that's what happens. Okay, so as she's sawing off her head still, that's when he looks over, sees the naked people in the corner, is scared shitless, I guess. He's still trying to, like, wake himself up, slapping himself, saying, like, wake up, Peter, like, wake up. And then he falls to the ground. You see a shadow go over top of him before the light descends into his chest. And that's Toni Collette's body floating
levitating.
Levitating. And I would assume shortly before that, you actually hear the thud of her head drop. So I'm assuming they picked it up or it levitated itself over and placed itself on the thing. Again, though, you get all these transitions where it's like he's laying in the flower beds. You're not sure how much time has passed. Seconds, minutes?
Yeah.
And a half an hour? I don't know.
Well, minutes, presumably.
Minutes, you would, presumably. But at the same time, you get the three characters that were in the attic in standing guard, like sentry, as he's kind of walking towards, it's almost like a ceremonial walk towards the treehouse.
Yeah.
And then that's where he's like sort of inducted as this King Paimon.
Which is just an aspect of the film that we didn't expect. And it was kind of neat. And it's like, I don't know if I want to call it like the folkloric aspects of hell, but it kind of is in a sense.
Well, it is.
This book, right? The idea that there's kings of hell.
Exactly. They're drawing from the 17th century collection of anonymous texts that are commonly known as like the Lesser Keys of Solomon. This is literally just like a quick, like, brief. What do you call it? It's a
synopsis.
No, it's not a synopsis.
The book.
It's a cursory glance.
Yeah. Cursory indeed.
Exactly. But it's essentially it's been divided into 5 books. One of which is this Ars Goetia. I'm not saying that right. Sorry, guys. But essentially, it describes these 8 kings of hell. And these texts are kind of described as grimoires or spell books. They're not encyclopedias. They're meant to be used by a practitioner.
Right. And you can buy them on Amazon.
You can buy them on Amazon. And it's interesting because, like I said, these are anonymous texts. They're not really sure where they're derived from. But a lot of people attribute them to this Johann Wenner's Pseudo-Monarchia Daemonum, which is just the false monarchy of demons.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. It's a false god. It's a false deity that these people are worshipping, right? Mm. And so digging into what Paimon actually represents is that he's interesting. He's powerful, man. He's got 200 legions of demons under his rule. He's definitely very obedient to Lucifer, apparently. Has a great voice and roars as soon as he comes, which is interesting, right? Because Peter doesn't embody any of that.
Right. Well, this is the human form, though, so it's
totally.
Like, okay, very well.
Exactly. And so it says here, it's interesting. It says, when a conjurer invokes this demon, he must look towards the northwest, like they said in the movie, right? Which is the direction of Paimon's house. And when Paimon appears, he must be allowed to ask the conjurer what he wishes and be answered in order to obtain the same from him. Mm. But it's weird because he's almost like this giver of esoteric knowledge forms, described as teaching all arts, philosophy, science, secret things, unraveling the mysteries of the earth, all this kind of stuff.
That makes hell sound kind of like jail. You get free education.
But this is interesting. The second point here, it says, if Paimon is sighted alone, some offering or sacrifice must be done, and he will accept it.
Right.
So is his mother the sacrifice? Did she sacrifice
Charlie
himself?
Was Charlie and / sacrifice?
But they do say that they've corrected his effeminate form. Like, that's what Joan says in the ceremony.
And I had this question while we were driving earlier today, and I was like, okay, sure, corrected the effeminate form, now you got your male form. Great, sounds good, Paimon, cool beans. How long are you going to be up there for, bro? Like, you're one of the kings of hell. Is this just like a vacation? You're just up here, like, occupying a human body for a little bit, and then you go back down, command your 200 legions. Like, this is just like a part-time thing. It doesn't make sense.
I'm not sure.
Like, why?
That's the thing that bugs me about this movie, is that we don't see what goes on after this scene. We're not sure, like, is he inheriting literally a throne where they're going to worship him his entire life? Is he going to be in for some bad news bears when they're done this ritual? Like, or what's going to happen to this guy? Is he going to literally become Charlie? Like Charlie 2.0? Where it's like...
Well, he's not going to school the next day, presumably, right? Like, that's what you're asking. It's like, where does he go? How does this unfold from here. He's in a human body that still has to live and die, carbon-based.
Yeah.
So if you're occupied by this king of hell now, then, like, is it just for, like, that's my question. Is it just for a little while? These people worship you and then they get a new one or something, or...
That's the question. There's lots of questions left.
If anyone listening is a part of a black magic demon cult, let us know.
What's the turnover rate?
What's the turnover? Yeah. You posted on Indeed. I don't know. Like, we should post that on Indeed. Just like see the ad, be like, human host for payment, demon god, full benefits package. Yeah. Okay, I have a question for you about this movie.
Oh, okay. Throw it out there.
You're not ready for it.
I don't know.
Before we wrap up, I'm just curious, like, that's the one thing I always think about watching horror movies is always like, okay, if I was in any of these situations myself, it'd be like, what's my course of action here? Out of the 3 sort of horror, thriller, paranormal, scary movies we've covered so far on Film Friday, which scenario would you, if you had to pick one, which scenario would you most like to be in?
Oh, God.
I have my answer already.
I think I'd probably go with The Ritual.
Oh, hands down.
Yeah.
Oh, hands down.
Because that is something that isn't specific to that group. It's not as if they're singled out, destined for this.
They're just there.
And they have all the means of modern technology. They have all the wits about him. If he just hadn't gotten into the goddamn woods.
Yeah, I guess if you're stalked by a demon, you can't really... It's a little more...
Well, you mean like with this film here? Where
when you're dealing with like the stuff in The Witch and in Hereditary, it's like a little more extreme.
It is, and it's like it's so much more ambiguous though too.
Right, you can't just run away from a monster.
You can't. No, and exactly that. Like it's not your self is compromised. That's the scariest part about this to me is the fact that there are these sort of like it's almost like you could take the model house analogy and apply it to each character and say that there are a lot of rooms that they don't go into. There's a lot of things they don't explore. Doesn't mean that it's not there and with them.
Right.
And inevitably with them, it's not something they can shed. You know what I mean? Like with The Ritual, it was just, yeah, exactly that. It was just some crazy ass like cult they just stumbled across and they're just like, okay, you know what? I guess we're all dead. But, you know, like that was more avoidable.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So you're the same answer?
Same answer, hands down. Because at least you got some buds with you. You got, yeah, like you know what you're up against. Yeah. I mean, you don't know what you're up against, but they figure it out. It's like, okay, we don't know what it is, but it's like, it's massive, it's a monster, time to run away.
Yeah.
Whereas with this stuff, it's a little bit more like, you're kind of, even if you do run away,
there's no monsters, there's no tangible object to fear.
No. Because I made that comment too earlier on, and we always do. It's like, with the husband, it's like, bro, you couldn't see the writing on the wall with your mother-in-law in the house here, dude? Mm-hmm. Like, head on down to Cancun and send the divorce papers from there.
No
like,
kidding.
What are you doing? Like, what are you...
Obviously, it runs in the family.
Yeah, clearly. Like, this is not a good scene.
No.
You can do better, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's our take on Hereditary.
It is.
Yeah.
So we want to know what you guys think. We're going to be opening this up for discussion all this week. And get at us.
Yeah, let us know what you think. You can always email us into the portal mailbox at gmail.com. Hit us up on Facebook, anywhere else. We're definitely curious to see what you guys have to think about this one.
Yeah.
Be warned before you watch it if you haven't, because I know there's some people that do have listened to the first 2 without watching the movies, but they don't really care. They just wanted to, and then they watched it after and still enjoyed it. Be warned a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like this conversation could have definitely ruined it if you haven't seen the movie. So I would highly recommend, even though it's too late now because you already listened. Anyways.
It's definitely one of those ones I would recommend, but it's like you wouldn't watch it over and over. Like The Ritual, I feel like I could watch a 3rd, 4th time.
Just so all our listeners are aware, we only watched this movie once, and we only watched it last night. And I'm glad, it was fresh, but I'm glad we had the night to let it sink in. I had a bit of nightmares last night. Yeah, I literally, it started off all completely normal in my dream. We're in our little loft, we're doing our thing. And then out of nowhere, my body froze and it was almost like the classic position of like a figure skater when they start to do the low spin where they have their leg out. It was like I had my leg extended out and then I just started spinning in a circle like really fast and I couldn't control what my body was doing. And it was really freaky. And then I woke up and I was like, and then I started thinking about the movie and all the most disturbing images started popping in my head and I was like,
great.
This is really bad. This is not good. But I made it through the night.
She made it. Now, next week, we're covering a movie that's been out for a lot longer. So if you haven't already seen it, go watch Donnie Darko. Mm-hmm. One of our absolute favorites. It's been suggested by a bunch of people. That's what we're covering next week.
And I would recommend watching the extended cut or director's cut.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yes. So go check that out. And thank you so much for listening to this third Film Friday review. And until this Sunday, we'll see you guys then.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.